wanting to see what size dick it had, along with checking the night before the killing that Brianna was coming, show your own interests in killing Brianna linked to your hostility towards her as a transgender person. Just as you knew of Scarlett's motives, she knew of yours, although I cannot go so far as to say she used your transphobic attitudes to get you involved. I therefore find that you both took part in a brutal and planned murder which was sadistic in nature and where a secondary motive was hostility towards Brianna because of her transgender identity. In any event, however it is analysed, I think it is plain that this was a murder of particularly high seriousness and that the part each of you played leads to the starting point of 20 years. Had I not reached that conclusion, I would have treated the sadistic motives and transphobic comments as significant aggravating features at the next stage. As it is, I will be careful not to double count things that have already gone into the starting point. There are many serious features in this case, but they overlap, and it would be wrong to treat each one as separately uplifting the minimum term. I also keep firmly in mind that you are very young, and you must be sentenced with the hope, if not the immediate expectation, that you can one day be rehabilitated, however cruel that may seem to those who have lost a loved one. Looking at aggravating factors, Brianna's murder involved a significant degree of planning and premeditation, with more general plans to kill other people. The planning started with you, Scarlett, and it was you who brought Eddie in. But Eddie, you joined in with the planning. I do bear in mind that apart from the awful subject matter, the plans were in some ways quite childish. Scarlett's notebooks were left where they could easily be found. But the extent of the planning, on any view, remains a significant aggravating factor for each of you. In your case, Scarlett, I have to bear in mind that you tried to kill Brianna by poisoning her. Although that does not apply to you, Eddie, you did encourage further attempts at poisoning, although that did not happen. Both of you were involved in the failed attempt to kill Brianna on the 28th of January and persisted when that did not come off. Brianna was vulnerable, as described by her family, even if not strictly to be treated as vulnerability in the statutory sense. You picked Brianna because you both thought she would be an easy target. In doing so, you, Scarlett, abused her trust. She thought you were her friend. You encouraged her not to be anxious and guided her through getting the bus. Eddie, you knew Scarlett was preying on Brianna in this way, and so it aggravates your offending too, although perhaps to a lesser degree than Scarlett's. I recognise these features are part of the planning I have described, and I avoid double counting, but they are still matters to put in the balance. I have taken account of the brutality of the killing and the use of the knife when assessing the starting point. I have also built in the sadistic motive and transphobic hostility. All these things are very serious features, but I have explained how they are linked, and so they do not each call for separate additional uplifts. They do, though, have to be recognised in balancing the aggravating and mitigating features. Taken together, they illustrate how serious this offence was, even in the context of other murders falling into the category I have identified. The attempts to conceal evidence were not sophisticated and do not have any significant impact. Brianna's body was not concealed, probably because you were disturbed. I will not speculate as to what might have happened if you had not been. It is an aggravating feature that you committed the murder in broad daylight in a park when there were other people around, including a family playing hide and seek and lots of dog walkers. It was always likely that other people would come upon the scene and suffer trauma, as happened. In considering mitigation, I have considered everything I have read about you, including the pre-sentence reports. I bear in mind your previous good character, although this must be viewed in the context of very serious offending and the contents of the messages. Within the 15 to 16 age range, there will be differing levels of maturity. I must look at your maturity while also thinking about any mental or developmental disorders which may have lowered your culpability, looking at the various reports on you both. Scarlett, the assessment of your intellectual ability fits with other evidence that you are not mature or clever. You have some vulnerabilities. Since you were about 14, you have had problems with your mood, anxiety, self-harming, and anorexia. Reports prepared before the trial suggested you had traits of autism and ADHD. Dr. Church no longer thinks that applies. You have changed your account since the trial. You have admitted taking part in Brianna's murder. You have said things about what you did and how you felt, both to Dr. Church and to others, including Miss Howarth, who wrote the pre-sentence report. You have lied so many times, Scarlett, that it is impossible to know what is true and what is not. There are, though, worrying things in the recent reports. You have expressed the desire to kill again. If those thoughts continue, you will not be released. Dr. Church's latest report will need to be retained on your file. It contains important information the parole board would need to consider. You have shown no remorse. Having now assessed you several times, Dr. Church has diagnosed that you have a severe form of conduct dissocial disorder, one of the features of which is having no empathy. Your lack of empathy does provide some explanation for how you could commit such a dreadful murder, but in my view, it does not significantly lower your culpability. There is no suggestion that you did not know that what you were doing was wrong or that you were unable to control your actions. You were able to plan in an organised way and had full awareness that it was criminal behaviour. In short, your diagnosed disorder did not drive your actions, although it meant you did not have the mental break that most people have to stop them wanting to harm others because that feels wrong. It may not have felt wrong, but there is no doubt you knew it was wrong to act as you did, and you chose to do so anyway. I take account of the diagnosis, but in my view, it offers limited mitigation. There are no other relevant diagnoses in your case, but there are some concerns about your mental health and how you will respond after today, which those responsible for your care will no doubt note first. But the hope remains that this can happen, and you should work hard on your rehabilitation. Eddie, you have been described as extremely vulnerable. There are areas in which your functioning is like that of a much younger child. Your social skills are certainly not as developed as most people of your age. I have looked carefully at the limitations outlined by Dr. Diggle, but it is hard to view these limitations as significantly lowering your culpability for Brianna's murder. I should also say that my analysis of your offending differs in some important respects from that contained in the pre-sentence report. Ms. Howarth has attempted to make sense of what you have told her, but you have not given a truthful account. I have found her report helpful, though, reading it in the context of my factual findings. I bear in mind that it is difficult for a proper assessment to be made as to the impact of your ASD while you continue to deny what you did. But I am confident from all I have seen that you knew very well that what you were doing was terribly wrong and that you were capable of saying no to Scarlett. Your autism cannot provide any real excuse for the offence. I do, though, recognise that some downwards adjustment is required in balancing against the aggravating factors to reflect that you are less mature than many others within the 15 to 16 age category, and that your thinking skills are less developed in several areas. More generally, your ASD, severe anxiety, and selective mutism has made your experience of custody more difficult. Despite this, Dr. Crawford's latest report shows reasonable progress. You have managed to pass your GCSEs while in custody and to begin studying A-levels, and you have agreed to start speech and language therapy. Although you showed no remorse at trial, or indeed today, the pre-sentence report showed some insight into Brianna's family's feelings. You told Miss Howarth, "I wouldn't think that there is anything to say because I'm certain that there is nothing either of us could say that would ever help them with their situation and would more than likely cause more pain." This is, in fact, quite a mature statement and one that may be built upon. I also find that it is consistent with my view that despite the limitations identified in the expert evidence, you are capable of thinking about the consequences of your actions. Taking the evidence as a whole, I find that the impact of your ASD on your culpability is limited. I do not doubt that transferring to prison when you are an adult will be difficult. Prison is more difficult for those who are neurodiverse. Your behaviour in custody has been good so far, and it is clear from the pre-sentence report that there is a hope that you may one day be rehabilitated. You must continue to work towards that. I have weighed all the aggravating and mitigating factors that apply to each of you. Although I have taken the same starting point, I have concluded that the final minimum terms must be different. In Scarlett's case, the aggravating features are significant and would have led to a substantial uplift to the starting point, but for the mitigation, particularly that relating to maturity and mental disorder. There must still be an uplift, but it will be moderated. In Eddie's case, I find that the balance to be struck between aggravating factors, which are not quite as high as in Scarlett's case, and the mitigation I have identified is such as to cancel each other out. In saying that, I have taken account of all the medical evidence and accept the diagnosis of ASD has some impact, but the extent to which it reduced your culpability in the circumstances of this offending is limited. This was undoubtedly a very serious offence with multiple aggravating factors. That is the context in which I impose minimum terms which are lengthy for offenders of your age, albeit significantly less than an equivalent sentence for an adult. The parole board will have to decide if and when either or both of you can be released. That will only happen if you no longer pose a danger. If you are released, you will remain on licence for life and you may be recalled to prison. I will now sentence each of you. You may remain seated. In both cases, the relevant statutory surcharge will apply. Scarlett Jenkinson, for the murder of Brianna Ghey, you will be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. I set the minimum term at 22 years, less the 352 days that you have spent on remand. Eddie Ratcliffe, for the murder of Brianna Ghey, you will be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. I set the minimum term at 20 years, less the 352 days that you have spent on remand. Please take the defendants to the cells and their legal teams will come and see them before they go to begin their sentences. Thank you.